Hashtag how to stop comparing yourself to others. Hashtag get up life. Full narration script hook. A study from the University of Michigan found that just 10 minutes on social media is enough to trigger feelings of inferiority in the majority of users. Not hours. Not a full scroll session. 10 minutes. And here is the part that will genuinely stop you in your tracks. The people triggering those feelings are not celebrities, not billionaires, not superhumans. They are ordinary people living ordinary lives. People just like you. That is how powerful comparison has become. It is not a minor inconvenience. It is quietly destroying your sense of self, one scroll at a time. Tease in the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly why your brain is biologically wired to compare itself to others, why most advice on this topic completely misses the point, and the one counterintuitive shift that actually breaks the cycle for good. We are going to go through the science, the psychology, and a practical framework that nobody in the self-help world wants to talk about, because it contradicts the feel-good advice you have been hearing your entire life. Stay with this until the end. The last insight alone will change how you see yourself permanently. Background comparison is not a modern problem. It did not start with Instagram or TikTok or even television. Psychologist Leon Festinger identified the phenomenon back in 1954 and gave it a name, social comparison theory. His research revealed something fundamental about human beings: we do not evaluate ourselves in a vacuum. We determine our worth, our success, and our progress almost entirely by measuring ourselves against other people. This is not a character flaw. This is biology. Our ancestors survived by understanding where they stood in the social hierarchy. Knowing whether you were stronger, faster, or more resourceful than the person next to you was a genuine survival advantage. The brain that compared itself to others lived longer and reproduced more successfully. So evolution selected for comparison. It baked it into our operating system. But here's what nobody talks about. The environment that comparison evolved to handle looked nothing like the world we live in today. For most of human history, you compared yourself to maybe 150 people, your village, your tribe, your community. That was your entire social universe. Today, a single person on social media can expose themselves to the lives of millions of people within minutes. The comparison instinct is the same. The inputs have exploded by a factor of thousands. Your brain is running ancient software on a completely incompatible system. And the result is psychological overload on a scale that no generation in human history has ever experienced before. Main content. So what does this actually do to you? Research published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found a direct causal link between social media use and both depression and loneliness. Not correlation, causation. And the mechanism driving that link is comparison. When you see someone else's highlight reel, your brain does not process it as a highlight reel. It processes it as reality. It treats that curated, filtered, perfectly timed snapshot as an accurate representation of someone else's entire life. And then it compares that fiction to your own unfiltered, behind-the-scenes, messy, complicated reality. Of course you lose that comparison every single time. You are comparing their best moments to your worst ones. That game is rigged from the start. But the damage goes deeper than mood. A study from Princeton University found that social comparison directly suppresses activity in the brain's reward centers. When you compare yourself unfavorably to someone else, your brain literally reduces its production of dopamine, the chemical associated with motivation, pleasure, and drive. In other words, comparison does not just make you feel bad. It physically reduces your capacity to pursue the things you want. It steals your ambition from the inside out. Rhetorical question: what if the comparison itself is not the real enemy? What if it is the direction of the comparison that matters? Festinger actually identified two types. Upward comparison, looking at people who appear to be doing better than you. And downward comparison, looking at people who appear to be doing worse. Most people assume downward comparison is healthy because it makes you feel better about yourself. But research tells a more complicated story. Downward comparison breeds complacency. It kills your drive to grow. And upward comparison, done correctly, can actually be a powerful source of inspiration. The difference is not who you are comparing yourself to. It is why. Deep dive. Here is the insight that most self-help content refuses to touch. The advice you have heard 1,000 times: stop comparing yourself to others, you are on your own journey, run your own race. That advice, while well-intentioned, is neurologically impossible to follow as a standalone instruction. You cannot simply tell a brain wired for comparison to stop comparing. That is like telling your lungs to stop breathing. What you can do is redirect the comparison. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. Research from Stanford University on a concept called self-compassion, pioneered by psychologist Dr. Kristin Neff, found that people who practice self-compassion are significantly more motivated, more resilient, and more successful over time than people who use self-criticism as their primary driver. And what is self-compassion, at its core? It is comparing yourself to yourself. Your past self versus your present self. Not someone else's journey, your own. When you shift the axis of comparison from horizontal to vertical, from looking sideways at others to looking back at your own progress, the entire psychological equation changes. Your brain still gets the comparative data it craves. But now the data is actually useful. This is sometimes called the personal best framework. Elite athletes have understood this for decades. The world's greatest sprinters do not obsess over other runners. They obsess over their own personal records. Their competition is yesterday's version of themselves. And because that standard is always within reach, it produces consistent motivation rather than chronic inadequacy. But here's what nobody talks about: this framework does not come naturally. It has to be deliberately installed. Because your default setting is outward comparison. Rewiring that default requires a specific daily practice, not a one-time mindset shift. Analysis. So what does this look like in the real world? Start with awareness. Most people do not even notice when they are comparing. It happens beneath the level of conscious thought. A friend mentions their salary, and your mood drops. You see a peer's success on LinkedIn, and suddenly your own achievements feel hollow. The first step is simply catching it in the moment. Label it out loud or in your head: I am comparing right now. That act of naming the pattern disrupts its automatic power over you. The second step is sourcing the comparison. Ask yourself, what specifically am I measuring? Most of the time, you will find that you are comparing your weakest area to someone else's strongest one. You are comparing your financial situation to someone else's career highlight. Your relationship struggles to someone else's wedding photos. Your body on a bad day to someone else's gym transformation. The comparison is almost never apples to apples. It is apples to the idea of apples. The third step is the redirect. Take the energy of that comparison and turn it into a question: what would it look like if I made genuine progress in this area for the next 90 days? Not compared to them. Compared to where I am right now. That question pulls your attention from an external, uncontrollable standard to an internal, completely actionable one. You stop asking why they have what you do not. You start asking what you are willing to do with what you already have. And the fourth step, which most people skip entirely, is curating your inputs. If your social media feed is a daily parade of people living lives that trigger chronic inadequacy in you, that is not a motivation tool. That is a weapon pointed at your self-worth. Unfollow ruthlessly. Not out of bitterness, out of strategy.